The room was tense before the first word was spoken. Cameras pointed in every direction. Reporters hunched over their notepads, and the air carried that thick mix of anticipation and suspicion that only happens when Wall Street power collides with political fire. Howard Lutnick, the billionaire CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, walked in with the practiced calm of a man who has weathered financial storms, scandals, and congressional hearings before. He adjusted his tie, smiled faintly for the cameras, and prepared to do what Wall Street executives always do when under scrutiny: defend, deflect, and downplay. But sitting across from him was someone who wasn't interested in polished answers or scripted talking points. Representative Jasmine Crockett had built a reputation for cutting through noise with sharp precision. She wasn't there to score headlines, though headlines would come. She was there for something far more dangerous to Lutnick's world. The truth. What happened next would shake the room. 7 questions in the exchange was heated but still manageable. But the 8th. That's when Crockett dropped a secret that Lutnick never expected to hear spoken aloud in public. A secret that rattled Wall Street's polished armor. And for the first time that day, Howard Lutnick looked panicked. You might be asking, why should we care about this back and forth between a congresswoman and a billionaire CEO? Because this isn't just about one heated moment. This is about something bigger. The power Wall Street has to shape economies and lives. The way secrets, loopholes, and insider strategies ripple into the pockets of everyday people. And the fact that sometimes the truth doesn't come from financial analysts or investigative journalists. It comes from a single person daring to say what others are too afraid to. When Jasmine Crockett dropped her 8th point, she wasn't just challenging Lutnick. She was exposing a crack in the polished facade of Wall Street itself. And if you've ever wondered why the market feels rigged, why the rules never seem to apply equally, or why billionaires always seem to win while ordinary people pay the price, this is the moment you need to hear. Howard Lutnick walked into that room with confidence. Billionaire confidence. The kind that comes from decades of surviving scrutiny and knowing that money can smooth out most problems. He had his talking points ready. He had his narrative prepared. He believed he could glide through the storm the way he always had. But Crockett walked in with something more dangerous than confidence. Facts. She had receipts, context, and the willingness to push past the polished defenses to force Lutnick into a corner. This clash isn't just a story about Wall Street. It's a story about life. Because every day we see the same dynamic play out. People who speak with confidence even when they're wrong often dominate the conversation. But when someone finally comes prepared, when someone brings the truth, the entire room shifts. As the custom quote says, in a world full of confident fiction, it only takes one person with facts to change everything. Stick with me, because over the next few sections we're going to break down this moment piece by piece. The build-up. What created the tension before Crockett even spoke? Why was Lutnick in that room to begin with? And what narratives was Wall Street trying to protect the confrontation? A play-by-play of how the questioning unfolded, why Lutnick stumbled, and how Crockett's 8th point left the billionaire visibly rattled. The aftermath. How media markets and the public responded in real time. The bigger meaning. Why this story matters to you, to democracy, and to the way we think about truth in the age of spin your role. Because this story doesn't end with Crockett and Lutnick. It ends with all of us deciding whether we'll let confident fiction rule or whether we'll defend the truth. By the end, you won't just know what happened in that room. You'll understand why it matters and what it means for the rest of us watching from the outside. So picture it again. A billionaire used to control, suddenly thrown off balance by a representative, unafraid to ask what others won't. A secret spoken aloud echoing through the chamber. Reporters scrambling to capture the moment. Social media exploding with clips, memes, and outrage. That's the story we're about to unravel. And if you think this is just another political headline, think again. Because when Jasmine Crockett dropped her 8th point, she didn't just embarrass Howard Lutnick. She cracked open the door to how Wall Street really works and why the truth still has the power to shock, even in a world that thinks it's seen it all. Before the eighth point, before the cameras captured Lutnick's panic, there was a slow, deliberate rise in tension. And if you've ever watched hearings like these, you know they don't just explode out of nowhere. They build layer by layer, question by question, until the weight of unspoken truths becomes impossible to ignore. To understand why this moment mattered, we have to understand why Howard Lutnick was even there. Lutnick as the head of Cantor Fitzgerald represents not just a company, but a Wall Street culture, a culture of high-stakes trading, quiet deals and vast influence that stretches from New York boardrooms to Washington hallways. His presence wasn't voluntary, it was demanded. Lawmakers had questions about financial practices that, while legal on paper, raised deep ethical concerns, insider advantages, special market arrangements, strategies that often meant when ordinary investors lost, the big players still walked away with profits. These weren't abstract questions about economic theory. They were questions about fairness, about power, about whether Wall Street had written a rulebook for itself while everyone else played a different game. For Lutnick, this was supposed to be routine. Another round of tough questions, another chance to project calm. He'd done it before. He thought he could do it again. The room itself told its own story. Lawmakers shuffled papers. Aides whispered notes into ears and cameras from major outlets, zoomed in for the best shot. Everyone in that room knew this wasn't just about economics. It was about spectacle. The public had grown tired of billionaires testifying only to walk away unscathed. Many Americans believed hearings were just political theater, dramatic questions, rehearsed answers, and no consequences. But this time, there was a different kind of energy. Reporters sensed it. Staffers whispered about it. And when Jasmine Crockett's name appeared on the speaking order, a ripple of expectation moved through the chamber. Crockett was not the type to waste her turn on safe questions. She was known for precision, for preparation, and for making powerful people uncomfortable. To appreciate what Crockett disrupted, you have to understand the patterns. When Wall Street executives appear before Congress, they rely on a playbook. Deflect with jargon. Use technical terms to make the subject seem too complex for the average listener to grasp. Project calm. Smile, laugh lightly. Pretend every accusation is a misunderstanding. Shift. Blame point to regulators, competitors, or vague market forces as the real culprits. Run out the clock. Each member only gets a few minutes to question, so long-winded answers often eat up time. Howard Lutnick knew this playbook by heart. And for the first several minutes it worked. He leaned on industry. Jargon, spoke slowly, and looked unbothered. He framed Cantor Fitzgerald's practices as market efficiencies. He described loopholes as innovations. He presented profit-driven strategies as public service. It was a performance, and at first, it seemed like the same old show. Outside that chamber, the stakes were just as high. Millions of Americans tuned in with a mixture of cynicism and hope. Cynicism because many assumed Lutnick would walk away untouched. Hope because Jasmine Crockett had earned a reputation for not backing down. On social media, hashtags began trending before the hearing even started. Commentators speculated about what kind of confrontation might unfold. Some doubted Crockett could really corner a man as seasoned as Lutnick. Others predicted sparks. This mattered not just because of Wall Street, but because the public was desperate for accountability. Ordinary people had lost homes, savings, and jobs in financial crashes. They watched billionaires bounce back stronger every time while Main Street suffered. The system felt tilted, and Lutnick represented the tilt. When Crockett's turn finally came, the early questions seemed almost routine. She asked about Cantor Fitzgerald's role in market making. She pressed Lutnick on regulatory loopholes. She pointed to discrepancies between public statements and internal reports. Lutnick responded with polished ease. He leaned back, smiled, and deployed the playbook. His tone suggested Crockett was misinterpreting technical details. He reassured the room that Cantor Fitzgerald followed the rules. He insisted his firm's success was tied to the health of the markets overall. It was the kind of exchange that on the surface looked like every other hearing. But under the surface, the tension grew. Crockett wasn't satisfied. She wasn't interested in jargon. She was setting a trap. As her questioning deepened, Crockett began to close off Lutnick's escape routes. When he deflected with jargon, she translated his words for the public in plain English. When he projected calm, she countered with precise data. When he shifted blame, she redirected it back to his firm's own reports. Each move tightened the net. The cameras caught Lutnick's body language shift. His smile grew thinner. His answers longer. He adjusted his tie more often, leaned forward in his chair, and began to lose the smooth rhythm of his prepared script. The audience watching at home noticed tweets began to roll in. She's not letting him slip away. Finally, someone pushing past the Wall Street smokescreen. The buildup was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding in real time. By the time Crockett had asked her seventh question, the air was electric. Lutnick's composure was cracking, and the room knew it. But what no one expected was that she had saved her most devastating point for last. Her eighth question wasn't just a query. It was a revelation, a secret that connected the dots in a way no one had dared to do publicly. The buildup had done its job. The stage was set. The defenses weakened, the public watching. All that was left was the strike. And when it landed, Howard Lutnick didn't just stumble. He panicked. The buildup had done its work. Howard Lutnick was no longer the untouchable billionaire gliding through another hearing. The cracks had begun to show, and Jasmine Crockett was ready to deliver the blow that would leave Wall Street reeling. This is the moment we've been waiting for, the clash itself. Crockett's line of questioning had a rhythm. Each point chipped away at Lutnick's polished armor. Market influence. She pressed him on Cantor Fitzgerald's disproportionate sway over certain sectors, citing figures that contradicted his claim of limited influence. Lutnick smiled, insisting she was misreading the data. Crockett didn't flinch. Regulatory loopholes. She asked about practices that appeared designed to skirt regulations. Lutnick framed them as efficiencies. Crockett countered with documents labeling them avoidance strategies. Profit disparities. Crockett highlighted how Cantor thrived during downturns while ordinary investors lost everything. Lutnick blamed market cycles. Crockett noted that cycles always seemed to benefit the same players. Transparency. She demanded clarity on hidden fee structures. Lutnick claimed the information was public. Crockett, read from a report, proving otherwise. Conflicts of interest. She pointed out Cantor's dual role in advising and profiting. Lutnick shrugged it off as industry standard. Crockett shot back. Industry standard doesn't make it right. Public versus private messaging. She exposed contradictions between Lutnick's congressional testimony and private investor memos. His calm tone faltered. Accountability. She asked whether Cantor had ever faced real consequences for practices regulators had flagged. Lutnick began a long, winding explanation. Clearly stalling for time, Crockett cut him off. A yes or no will do. By this point, the tension was unbearable. Lutnick's once confident cadence was shaky. His body language betrayed unease. Leaning forward, fidgeting with his pen, forcing smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. The room felt it. The public watching online felt it. Everyone knew something big was coming. Then came the eighth question, the one that made Lutnick panic. Crockett leaned in, her tone measured, deliberate. The room fell silent. Mr. Lutnick, she began, you've spoken here about transparency, about fairness, about Cantor. Fitzgerald's supposed commitment to the markets. But what you haven't mentioned, what's buried in filings, most people will never read, is this. Your firm has been quietly profiting off trades designed to fail. Structured deals where the success of your investors meant nothing, because the real money came when those deals collapsed. Isn't it true that Cantor Fitzgerald not only knew these instruments were toxic, but positioned itself to win when others lost everything? Gasps filled the room. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Cameras zoomed in tight. Lutnick froze. His carefully rehearsed calm shattered in an instant. He opened his mouth, closed it, then glanced toward his counsel. His hand gripped the table so tightly, his knuckles whitened. For the first time all day, he looked panicked. This was no accident. Crockett had planned the arc of her questions with precision. Each earlier point narrowed Lutnick's oppo. Tiens. By the 8th, he was cornered. She translated jargon. Whenever Lutnick tried to confuse with complexity, she broke it down in plain English, keeping the audience with her. She cut off stalling. Every time he tried to run down the clock, she pressed him back to the core question. She used receipts instead of hypotheticals. She cited reports, memos, and filings, denying him the chance to shrug her off as uninformed. She escalated strategically. Each question raised the stakes, tightening the narrative until the revelation hit with full force. The brilliance wasn't just in the bombshell itself. It was in how she built to it, ensuring the impact was undeniable. Caught off guard. Lutnick scrambled. That's a mischaracterization, he stammered. Our intent has always been. But the words failed him. His usual composure was gone. His voice cracked. His hands shook, and the cameras caught it all. Crockett pounced. So you're denying Cantor? Fitzgerald profited from instruments structured to fail, despite filings that clearly show the opposite. Lutnick shifted in his chair, muttered about misinterpretations, and tried to pivot. But the damage was done. The visual, Howard Lutnick panicking under Crockett's question, was already the moment that would define the hearing. Lawmakers. Some leaned in, intrigued. Others smirked as if they'd been waiting for someone to say aloud what many suspected reporters. The room buzzed with energy. Smartphones lit up as journalists fired off breaking tweets. Crockett drops bomb on Lutnick. Wall Street CEO rattled the audience at home. Social media exploded. Clips spread instantly. Crockett's calm delivery. Lutnick's visible panic. Hashtags like Wall Street Secret and Crockett V's. Lutnick trended within minutes. The confrontation wasn't just playing out in the chamber. It was reverberating across the country in real time. The power of this moment wasn't just in the information. It was in contrast. Lutnick, a billionaire CEO. Confident, polished, but unraveling under pressure. Crockett, a congresswoman, calm, relentless, and armed with facts. The clash symbolized something bigger: performance versus preparation rhetoric, versus truth power, versus accountability. For years, Wall Street executives had walked into hearings expecting to glide past scrutiny. But Crockett proved those days weren't guaranteed. If this were a film, this would be the scene everyone remembers. The chamber falls silent. Crockett leans forward, voice cutting through the tension. Lutnick's mask slips. The billionaire looks suddenly small-cornered. The revelation lands like a thunderclap. And in that moment, the story shifts. What began as another hearing transforms into a public reckoning. Even before Crockett's time expired, the consequences were already in motion. Markets reacted as clips spread. Lawmakers whispered about follow-up investigations. Journalists drafted headlines that would dominate the next news cycle. But in the chamber itself, one fact was undeniable. Jasmine Crockett had not only cornered Howard Lutnick, she had shaken Wall Street's confidence itself. When Jasmine Crockett's 8th question landed, it didn't just rattle Howard Lutnick, it sent shockwaves far beyond the hearing room. What happened next was a cascade of consequences that unfolded like dominoes, each one bigger than the last. This is the fallout phase. The moment when the story stopped belonging to just two people in a chamber and became part of a national conversation. Before the hearing even adjourned, the media machine was already in overdrive. Cable news crawls flashed. Crockett confronts Lutnick over Wall Street, trades, business outlets. Published urgent push notifications. Cantor Fitzgerald CEO challenged on toxic trade profits. Social media timelines were flooded with short clips. Crockett's piercing delivery. Lutnick's panic-stricken pause, the exact second his composure cracked. Within an hour, hashtags like Wall Street Secret Crockett vs. Lutnick and Howard meltdown were trending worldwide. One commentator, or on X formerly, Twitter, summed it up. We just watched a billionaire CEO get undressed with nothing but facts. That's history. Wall Street noticed immediately. Cantor Fitzgerald wasn't a publicly traded company, but its reputation reverberated across markets. Competitors' stocks dipped as traders speculated on broader scrutiny. Financial analysts whispered about new investigations and potential reforms. Hedge fund chatter on private message boards revealed unease. If Crockett has docs on Cantor, who else is exposed? Bond markets twitched as investors reconsidered risks linked to structured deals. Regulators reportedly began calling staff into late-night meetings reviewing filings. Crockett had referenced, it wasn't just a political spectacle anymore. Money was moving. For ordinary people, the moment crystallized something they had long suspected, that Wall Street's success often comes at their expense. Workers and retirees shared personal stories online. Pensions gutted during downturns. Homes lost while banks thrived. Activists rallied around Crockett, framing her as a truth teller, taking on corporate power. Skeptics argued it was grandstanding, but even they couldn't deny the optics. Lutnick looked cornered. Crockett looked in control. The confrontation became a cultural moment. Late-night shows joked about it. Memes spread. Lutnick sweating under the caption, "When you realize Congress did the homework." Not all coverage was uniform. Progressive outlets framed it as David versus Goliath, a lone representative exposing billionaire misconduct. Conservative-leaning media accused Crockett of staging a political ambush, but still ran the clip because controversy sells. Financial news stuck to cautious terms. Contentious, heated, pointed exchange. But the images told a louder story than their words ever could. What united all coverage was the consensus that something unusual had happened. A CEO known for confidence had been his CEO invisibly shaken, and that mattered. By late evening, Cantor Fitzgerald released a carefully worded statement. Today's hearing raised serious questions, and while some characterizations were inaccurate, we remain committed to transparency and to the integrity of the markets. But the damage control didn't land. The words inaccurate and committed were no match for the viral image of Lutnick's panic. Leaks suggested his PR team scrambled behind-the-scenes phone calls to friendly journalists, attempts to reframe the exchange as a miscommunication, even quiet outreach to lawmakers for support. But in politics, optics often outweigh explanations, and Lutnick's optics were disastrous. For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath was a different story. Her social media following exploded. Clips of her questioning racked up millions of views. Grassroots groups hailed her as a watchdog for the people. Commentators predicted she had solidified herself as one of Congress's most formidable interrogators. It wasn't just that she had cornered Lutnick. It was how she had done it methodically, factually, without raising her voice. She embodied preparation, beating wealth and status. As one columnist wrote, in an era of political theater, Crockett proved substance still has power. She didn't just win the exchange, she shifted the narrative. The immediate fallout crystallized into 3 concrete consequences. Pressure on regulators. Calls grew louder for the SEC and other watchdogs to revisit Cantor Fitzgerald's practices. If Crockett had public documents proving misconduct, regulators had no excuse to ignore them. Political momentum. Other lawmakers, sensing the public mood, hinted at new hearings or legislation targeting Wall Street excesses. Crockett's questions had opened the door for broader reforms. Corporate anxiety executives at other firms reportedly instructed teams to audit communications and filings, fearing they might be next in the hot seat. The shockwaves were real, and they weren't contained to one company. Beyond numbers and headlines, the moment carried a deeper emotional resonance. People saw in Lutnick's panic a confirmation of long-held suspicions that power crumbles when confronted with truth. And they saw in Crockett's composure a reminder that accountability is possible, that ordinary people represented by their elected officials can still demand answers from the powerful. The hearing chamber had become a stage. Yes, but what played out wasn't mere theater. It was a battle over credibility, and credibility is the currency Wall Street can't afford to lose. As the dust settled from the first wave of fallout, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about a single confrontation. The real story was bigger. Why facts matter more than polished talking points. Why truth beats confidence when the stakes are highest. Why this moment symbolized more than one CEO's bad day. It symbolized a turning point in how power is challenged. The confrontation had ended, the immediate aftermath had begun. But the meaning of this story was still unfolding. The dust was still swirling around the hearing chamber, but the bigger picture was already clear. This wasn't just a moment between a CEO and a congresswoman. It was a reminder of something much larger, something we often forget until it bursts into view. Howard Lutnick's panic may have made headlines, but the story doesn't end with him. This was never just about a single executive squirming under tough questions. It was about the systems that allow the powerful to hide behind jargon, complexity, and confidence, until someone with the facts forces the truth into daylight. For years, Wall Street's culture has thrived on the assumption that ordinary people won't understand the details, that most won't read the filings, won't question the contradictions, won't connect the dots. And to be fair, the system is designed to make it that way: dense, confusing, inaccessible. But Crockett proved a simple truth. Clarity cuts through complexity. She asked the right questions at the right time in the right way. And when she did, the confidence of a billionaire wasn't enough to cover the cracks. In a media environment filled with spin, with soundbites, with confident-sounding claims designed to distract, it's easy to forget the power of facts. Crockett didn't win that exchange because she shouted louder. She didn't rely on theatrics. She relied on preparation, evidence, and persistence. That's why her 8th point landed like a hammer. It wasn't speculation. It was documented reality. Confidence can fill airtime. Rhetoric can win applause. But when the truth is brought into the open, no amount of polished talking points can stop it from landing. Or, as the custom quote we opened with reminds us, in a world full of confident fiction, it only takes one person with facts to change everything. The confrontation also revealed another lesson. Preparation is the great equalizer. Howard Lutnick walked into that chamber with wealth, influence, and a lifetime of experience, walking through hearings with ease. Jasmine Crockett walked in with research, patience, and the courage to ask questions that others avoided. And when it mattered most, preparation beat power. That's a lesson far beyond politics or finance. It's a principle anyone can carry into daily life, whether it's standing up to misinformation at work, questioning a misleading claim online, or holding leaders accountable in your own community. At its core, this moment wasn't just about Wall Street. It was about democracy itself. Because democracy isn't safe when facts are optional. It isn't strong when power goes unchecked. And it doesn't survive if ordinary people tune out, assuming someone else will do the hard work of asking questions. That's why Crockett's confrontation resonated so deeply. It wasn't just that she challenged a billionaire. It's that she reminded everyone watching what accountability looks like. Here's the truth. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It survives only when ordinary people defend the truth. The reason this matters, the reason it's worth more than one headline or one viral clip, is that it shows us what's still possible. When facts are brought forward with courage, they can shake even the most confident lies. When someone refuses to back down, it can ripple far beyond a single room. When truth meets power, head on, the balance shifts, even if only for a moment. And those moments are how history changes. So the question isn't whether Crockett embarrassed Lutnick or whether Wall Street will scramble to cover its tracks. The real question is, what will we do with this moment? Because truth doesn't defend itself. It depends on people, on us being ready to stand up for it. And that's where you, the audience, come in. We've walked through the drama, the confrontation, and the fallout. But now it's time to pause and ask the most important question. Where do you fit into this story? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about Jasmine Crockett or Howard Lutnick. It's about the choices we all make every day when confronted with truth fiction and the systems that shape our lives. Think about the hearing. A billionaire CEO used to power and polish unraveling when confronted with hard facts. Now ask yourself, how many times in your own life have you seen confidence win out over truth at work, in your community, even in family debates? How often do we let rhetoric, volume, or status drown out facts simply because it feels easier not to push back? And most importantly, what would happen if you were the one to ask the uncomfortable but necessary question? This story isn't distant. It's not just politics in Washington or trading floors in New York. It's a mirror for our own daily struggles with misinformation, manipulation, and misplaced confidence. We may not all sit in Congress, but we all face moments where truth is on the line. When a coworker spreads a false rumor, do we stay silent or correct it? When we see a misleading post online, do we scroll past or share the facts? When powerful voices tell us that's just how the system works, do we accept it or question it? Crockett's confrontation is dramatic. Yes, but at its core, it's no different from what happens in classrooms, offices, town halls, and social media feeds every single day. Truth doesn't defend itself. It needs people willing to stand up for it. Moments like this prove that change doesn't come from silence. It comes when ordinary people refuse to be passive. If you're watching this, you already care about accountability. You already see the value in pulling back the curtain on systems that prefer to stay hidden. The next step is engagement, not just watching but participating. That means asking yourself, what part of this story resonates with me the most? What questions would I have asked if I were in Crockett's chair? How can I apply the lesson? Preparation beating confidence in my own life. From passive to active. I want you to drop a comment right now. Do you think Crockett's questioning will lead to real accountability for Wall Street? Or will Lutnick and others find ways to wiggle free and beyond politics? Where in your own life have you seen confidence outweigh truth, and how did you handle it? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're real because your answers can spark conversations that matter. They can connect people who feel the same frustration, and they can inspire others to be braver when it's their turn to face power with truth. Think about how misinformation shows up outside politics. A product marketed as eco-friendly when it's anything but. A boss selling opportunities that are really just unpaid overtime. A social media influencer promoting a lifestyle that's staged for likes. We all navigate a world where polished confidence often masks manipulation, and we all have to decide, do we let it slide or do we call it out? That's why this story isn't just about Wall Street. It's about all of us learning to spot confident fiction and being ready with facts when it matters. Here. As the truth, media narratives shift when people demand it. Politicians act differently when they know the public is watching. Even billionaires can't ignore a groundswell of collective voices. So don't underestimate your role, your comments, your shares, your willingness to spread truth. It adds up. It shapes the conversation. It makes accountability harder to ignore. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just Jasmine Crockett's fight. It's ours. We've followed the story from start to finish, the setup, the confrontation, the fallout, and the deeper meaning. But before we close, we need to bring it all home. Because the lesson isn't just about Wall Street, it's about democracy, accountability, and what we choose to defend. We've traveled a long road together through this story. We started with intrigue. Howard Lutnick's polished confidence. We saw Jasmine Crockett methodically build her case. We witnessed the shocking eighth point that shattered his composure, and we followed the ripple effects as the confrontation spread from a single chamber to headlines, markets, and living rooms across the country. But here's the bottom line. This wasn't just a story about one CEO or one congresswoman. It was about the eternal clash between confidence and truth, between power and accountability. Howard Lutnick had wealth, influence, and a lifetime of experience, walking through hearings with ease. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered were the facts. Jasmine Crockett brought with her the preparation, the patience, and the courage to press forward when it would have been easier to back off. And that's the lesson worth carrying forward. Facts outlast spin. Preparation beats power. Truth matters because without it, democracy weakens. Crockett's confrontation can't stand alone. Accountability doesn't survive on single moments. It survives when people like you decide not to be passive spectators. If you've watched this far, you already understand that the fight for truth isn't just happening in Congress or on Wall Street. It's happening in your community, your workplace, and your daily conversations. So here's my ask. Engage. Leave a comment, sharing your thoughts on this confrontation. Do you think it will lead to change, or will Wall Street find ways to dodge accountability again? Share. Pass this story along to someone who needs a reminder that truth still has power. Stay connected. Subscribe so we can keep pulling back the curtain on moments that matter, because the more informed we are, the harder it becomes for misinformation to win. At the end of the day, this isn't about a headline or a viral clip. It's about what we choose to defend. Democracy doesn't crumble overnight. It erodes when truth is neglected, when power goes unchallenged, when ordinary people stop showing up. And that's why this moment matters, because it shows us that truth can still break through, and that accountability is possible if we're willing to fight for it. So let me leave you with this. In the end, democracy doesn't defend itself. That's our job. The question is, will you be ready when your moment comes?